I'm sure there's a lot that went into it, but could you kind of give a Cliff Notes version as to what brought about the decision of fully removing skill points? And I know it's one of the great benefits of it. It's very easy to interchange, and you're not dedicated to one set path. You know what I mean? And actually, I guess with that, there's obviously no more skill reset because there's no more skills, so skill points. So, but yeah, like a Cliff Note version of what brought about the decision.
So, when we put the game out into internal alpha, we had the system that we've shown previously at BlizzCon, where you had 7 slots. You put skills in those slots, and then you could assign skill points to improve them. And what we found was the UI was essentially telling people you should have 7 skills. But the skill point system says to players, if you really want to be optimum, you should dump everything into 1 skill or 2 skills. We tried to fight that a little bit by having kind of escalating caps on skills, but it didn't really work. And so the two things were fighting with one another, and the result of what we were getting was not what we wanted, which was more skills than people generally had in Diablo 2, because our combat system is really based around having somewhere between 4 to 6 skills. The other side of it was, by popular demand, we put in respec. And so what we saw happening is players would get their starter attack skill, and they'd put points into it, which was great. They didn't do that in D2. Once they figured out the system, they went, "Ooh, I shouldn't put any points into skills," which was terrible. But what would happen is they'd level up, they'd get to that next skill they want. They'd have Magic Missile, they'd get to Arcane Orb and decide, I don't want Magic Missile anymore, I want Arcane Orb. So they'd respec that early skill, take 5 or 6 points out of it, and mass dump them into Arcane Orb. And that, one, balancing nightmare, but more importantly, it felt really bad. It felt even more so like the character was trivialized, because these points could be just massively pulled from one place to the other. So those two things kind of warred against one another, and we decided, well, what happens if we just take skill points out and just say, you know what, let's just choose your skills, and that's what's most important. And that actually worked really well. But what it revealed was kind of a further truth about how people play Diablo. And I kind of evidenced it earlier. It's not a game like World of Warcraft, where you start with Fireball at level 1, and at level 85 you're still using Fireball. It's possible to do that. It's possible to take a starter skill and make it viable in-game, especially with runes. But it's not the instinct of what players do. Players want to level up to get to more powerful skills. And because they have that very finite window of skills, they want to respec and get into that next skill. They want to swap out. A game like Borderlands actually has a great model, because their attacks are tied into items, and you're used to items cycling out all the time. So it feels really natural. But for Diablo, it felt really unnatural to be doing the activity that you wanted to do the most. So we altered the skill system simply to provide that and say to players, you know what? Actually, you can switch out skills as much as you want. That's the way you naturally want to play, so we're going to let you do that. However, a system still needs restrictions to make it compelling. And the restrictions that we put in was to cap that total number of skills, both as you level up, but also we even pulled the cap down a little bit to 6 skills, because 7 actually felt like, we were watching this, and especially in our QA games and in the internal alpha, people could kind of get everything they wanted at 7. But at 6, they started having to make really hard choices about what. And it seems like just one skill difference, but it actually made a big impact. And so you combine that with having to choose one of several different rune effects per skill, and you start getting a lot of diversity in builds. And building those characters becomes really compelling, and that's what we're going for, a system that has a really compelling build process to it. I realize this is not the Cliff Notes.
No, it's fine.
But I figure you guys want more detail than I think I would normally give on this.
That's great.
The last thing I would throw out about this is, and this is something that we always kind of had a pipe dream about, that I think this last revision of the system actually gives us. I think this might be the first skill system that we've ever done where the player's first instinct is not going to be to go to a website and find out what their build is.
That's great.
And that's wonderful. Like, that's what we want. We want players to discover within the play space, make choices based on information, not make choices just based on, well, this sounds good, I hope it works, but I never got a chance to try it out. So that's one of the advantages of this system that we're really excited.
And all that, just a really quick note to that, everything is scalable? Is it by level or just by your your attack and everything? As that puts up your spells and abilities will scale as well.
So there's several ways that abilities scale. One is as you level up, abilities naturally scale. So, and it depends upon the ability. An ability like Bash is based on weapon damage, so it doesn't need to scale because your weapon damage is going to scale, and so it automatically gets better. But an ability like Magic Missile, which has a set damage amount, it scales kind of as you level up automatically. There are several attributes on both items, basically on items, and some that you get leveling up. You don't get many attributes from leveling up, but you do get a little bit that affect abilities. Primarily attack, which increases your damage, but precision, which is a side effect because of crit. Some abilities key off of crits. There's even some abilities that key off of your defense value. So those can affect, and then runes are probably one of the biggest ways to extend the power of abilities because there's 7 kind of power levels of runes, each one better than the last, and those continue well beyond normal difficulty up into nightmare difficulty in hell.